Charlie Cushane here. If you'd like to hear our story of how we Rube Goldberg-ed our truck camper to get it home 2,400 miles to avoid the coronavirus pandemic, watch this video. Okay, let me set the stage. My wife and I were on our trip around the country with our truck and camper, and we had traveled from Florida over the Panhandle through New Orleans and Mardi Gras, which was great, and then we went to San Antonio, Texas, and that was great, and we kept on going west along Route 10 all the way out to Quartzsite, Arizona, someplace we'd never been. And we parked in the middle of the desert, and we were there for 5 days. And as we were there for 5 days, we started hearing how the coronavirus pandemic was getting worse and worse and worse all over the country. And we were headed west to California, which we are now hearing all the state parks and campgrounds were starting to close. And also from there we were going to go to Las Vegas, where the casinos are, and those were all closing. Now we had choices. We were in the middle of the desert, dry camping, and we could have stayed there as long as we wanted. However, we knew our water was going to run out, and the propane tanks would go dry, and we need that for the refrigerator. So we started wondering, in a week or so, when we needed more water and we had to dump our tanks and get more propane, would the people in town be there? And they'd also put us at risk getting groceries and things like that. So we started debating, should we stay relatively safe in the desert and risk everything, or drive all the way back to Florida where we can hunker down? And what ultimately changed our minds was we got very nervous that if one of us got sick and we were in the middle of the desert, would the other person be able to handle everything on their own? And how would we travel with a sick person? And it just got very complicated. So we decided to return home. We didn't want to, but we felt compelled to. So we actually packed up the camper and we immediately got back on Route 10 heading east, all the way back home, 2,400 miles. However, this is where the story got kind of complicated. After the first 350-mile drive, we pulled over at a rest area, and everything was great. We had a nice dinner, we went to bed, and all of a sudden I was woken up by a tick, tick, tick noise that kept repeating, tick, tick, tick. I'm there, what is that? Is that water? It's not raining out. For some reason, and I don't know why, the noise continued. So I got all dressed, went outside, looked around the camper, because it wasn't in the camper. I looked outside, and it was coming around my passenger or driver's side rear well, where my airbag inflator was, the compressor and control and everything. And I thought, oh boy. And what I also noticed is all the lights were on, the brake lights of the camper and the truck. And they were just on bright in the middle of the night when we're sitting there. So I started the truck, I tried to step on the brake, put the blinkers on, and those lights just stayed on. So I got very nervous, something was seriously wrong. And what I ended up doing is unplugging the umbilical cord from the truck to the camper, and that turned the lights off. And I said, okay, for tonight, I'll just leave everything unplugged and I'll deal with it in the morning. I said, because the ticking noise was coming from the air compressor controller area, I'll unwire that in the morning. So went to bed. Didn't sleep a wink because I was so nervous. Got up at the crack of dawn, and I mean the sun was just rising, and I was under that truck, and I completely unwired the entire airbag controller. And the compressor I undid, the controller, and I unwired everything electrically. And I said, oh, that's got to fix it. And I hooked the umbilical cord back on, and lo and behold, all the lights came back on again. The brake lights, they were like fixed on. So I said, oh no, that was not the problem. There was no ticking noise, but the lights were still on. So I started unplugging everything, my running board lights, the extra auxiliary lights and the back poles that I had put on, I unwired those. Nothing solved the problem. The brake lights just stayed on high, like you had your foot on the brake. The blinkers didn't work. I said, this is a major problem. We can't drive all the way back with no taillights. So this is where you have to be creative on the road. And I decided, we're gonna find the closest auto parts store. And there was a Napa 3 or 4 miles down the road. So in this town, so we drove with no taillights, nothing, all the way into town to this Napa. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. Luckily, thank God, they were open. I went in, asked them about a set of lights like you used to see on people when they used to tow a car. They used to put these like magnetic lights on their trunk lid. I said, that's what I need. And lo and behold, they had a set of those with a big long wire that goes to your 4-pin connector on your bumper. And I bought a set, and we spent 2 hours in the parking lot of this town, in the Napa store, and wired them up. And there was no good way to do it. We had the Rube Goldberg and fish wires, and then I actually took tape, clear packing tape, and wrapped it around the light to the poles, the Rico Titan jack poles, so they were set there. And what was most amazing about the whole situation is when I went in to buy the lights in the Napa, I was talking to the guy, and he says, you're lucky I'm open. I said, what do you mean lucky? He said, the entire town has been closed down because of the coronavirus. The schools, everything. They shut the entire town down. But they didn't tell me I had to shut down, so I'm open, and you're lucky that I'm open. And I said, I sure am. So after we did all that on the lights and got them working, and we're using the 4-pin connector, because I couldn't rely on the 7-pin, everything seemed to work. So we got back on the road, and we drove for 5 straight days, 2,400 miles with these Rube Goldberg lights. And it was a really hard time because every time we went in a rest stop, we were so nervous about this pandemic, corona pandemic. We'd go in rest stops, we'd use our own bathroom in the camper. We'd go into a gas station, I'd just get gas and then we'd leave. We would never go into the stores or anything. And we drove all the way home, and as we were driving all the way through Louisiana and Mississippi and all the way Alabama to Florida, they had electronic billboards. And these billboards had all these coronavirus warnings: avoid the chronically ill, look out there, all these, and I'll show you pictures here of all the different lighted billboards we saw. And as we were getting to Florida, they were even closing the beaches. So we finally made it all the way home. And I'm right now in the garage. We just got here yesterday, 5 straight days. It was a lot of driving. Even my wife did some of the driving. And normally I do all the driving, but I was so tired some of these long days of driving. She actually drove and did a great job. So let me show you how I Rube Goldberg the lights. So what I did is I actually added these little lights. You can see I wrapped packing tape around them, and that held it nicely, tightly in place. And then I had to run the wires down. As you can see, the wires run down they wrap around my sewer pipe. There was so much extra wire, I didn't want to cut it. I wrapped it around and taped it. And then that goes to the 4-pin connector over there. And that's what got me home. Well, the ending to this story is my wife and I have made it home, and we were able to luckily gather enough food for at least 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. We're going to hunker down in our house, avoid everybody, and hope that this coronavirus flattens out, as they say, with the curve, and things start going back to normal. But if you are on the road and you have to do something to get yourself home, whatever it is, make it safe. We'll see ya. Thanks for listening.